Why was that one guy fired from your work? And invited the cleaning guy to meet him outside to fight because he was denied access to the restroom until it was fully cleaned. The cleaning guy is known for being extremely calm, polite, and nice to everyone. For someone to have a problem with him means that they have to be a certain kind of entitled a-hole. This happened in view of at least 10 coworkers, me included. Everyone was confused, but our manager was proactive about it. He told the guy to meet him at the HR office and was promptly fired. After the manager returned, he made a quick meeting. His words were, "We're all grown adults here. Well, some of us are. I just want to put it out there and say that I'll be considerably harsh to anyone that disrespects any coworker, especially when they're responsible for making sure that your ass cheeks sit on a clean toilet. Also, don't invite people to fight you if you're not willing to go through with it." After the meeting was over, some of us asked him what he meant with that last sentence, and he told us that the guy got violent in the HR office and invited him to fight in the parking lot when he was told he was getting terminated. Story 2. Well, there was the new CFO who was shown the door at lunchtime on his first day. Then the stock email about "do not use the corporate internet to visit inappropriate websites" was sent out. Story 3. He spent the entire time playing a game on his own handheld console. Instead of testing the game, we were doing overtime to actually test. Got very angry at being let go. Story 4. He did substances. People were suspecting that he was because he started going in the bathroom every day. At first, it was like 5 minutes. And then every day it would get a little longer until he was spending like 30 minutes a day every day. This place wasn't exactly picky about who they hired, and he had just got out of jail for selling substances, so it wasn't like an unfounded suspicion. One day he started falling asleep standing up. He started mumbling gibberish and kind of trying to talk to people, and the supervisor saw him and he was "BT chief, is he saying?" Then they were just like, "You gotta go. Call your dad to pick you up." Story 5. Guy had anger problems and one day went off screaming about how someone stole something from his backpack in the break room. Manager asked what was missing. "My substances and grinder." Funniest part is after he was fired for bringing it to work, and clearly high, offered him a substances test, but he didn't see the point. He left the building, only to find his pot and grinder on the sidewalk around the corner from the store, where he had spaced it out after getting high on break. Story 6. Work at a payroll company. We had an employee who switched like 20 direct deposits to her own account. It was all very traceable, and she was caught like later that day. Story 7. I had an employee/helper apprentice that worked for me for 2 years. I did new construction plumbing. Occasionally, you'll have a callback to a home that has a problem after the new homeowner moves in. I had such a call. So me and this guy goes to the home and knocks. A beautiful 30-something lady answers the door. Asking her what her problem was, she says, "When I take a shower, the shower head makes a whistling noise." And my helper blurts out to her, "Hell, if I saw you naked, I'd whistle too." She, rightly so, complained to the development construction supervisor. He told me that the helper could not come back to work in that development, being that it was the only work I had. I had to fire him. Story 8. She watched Netflix at her desk and took naps with the volume up. Her desk was in the middle of the office. There was no hiding. She also ducked up a lot. Story 9. Called a colleague his desert princess. She did not approve vocally. After a few incidents, she got upset. In response, the colleague doubled down. "What are you gonna do, princess? Punish me?" He crawled over the floor, begging to be spanked. Story 10. He claimed he was in the National Search and Rescue Brigade, which is entirely volunteer-based. They're sort of like our troops. They get perks and can't be fired if they get called out and so on. He skipped work all the time, claiming it was because he was called in. One day, someone from the office decided to check if he was, and turned out he lied about the whole thing. I'm pretty sure he got blacklisted by the entire city, which would explain why I haven't heard anything about him for years. Story 11. Harry, the special needs guy. Someone at work introduced him into adult film Mag in a Truck. Harry was never the same. Harry kept pleasure himself in front of the women in the office and in the warehouse. The boss knew that Harry was corrupted and really tried to fix the situation, as it was important for Harry to stay employed. I guess in the early 2000s, a boss could get away with this sort of thing. Harry's life went really downhill after he got fired, and really sad, and it explains why the boss tried to fix the situation despite the intolerable things he was doing. Story 12. Ate another coworker's lunch. There was a box of chicken in the break room refrigerator. It was one of those combos with mashed potatoes and a biscuit. There were cameras in the break room, so when the employee reported his lunch missing, they reviewed the footage. After confronting the lunch bandit, his excuse was it was abandoned chicken. Story 13. Worked at a publication. Hired a new guy who was super nice and everybody liked him. Within a week, found he was plagiarizing everything he wrote. Immediately gone, no questions asked. Story 14. People were fired from my job only for gross act. Like 1. Taking a fire extinguisher and spritzing it all over the office. Breaking the glass part of a door owing to some minor frustration. I was in a civil service job. It's very Difficult for people to get fired unless they really screw up. Story 15. She. One of our janitors survived a boat fire during vacation, second-degree burns on her arms and legs, so she went on sick leave. Next day, she was fired for economic reasons. A month or so after that, the company filed for bankruptcy. Story 16. I will never forget this happening, so I think this was either 2002 or 2003, somewhere in there, working at a GameStop. There were two in the close vicinity, a strip mall store and an actual mall store. Theory at the time was strip mall was for used, retro, and mall was for the shiny new stuff, back when you could get Genesis games at a GameStop. I worked at the strip mall store, but get asked if I want to be a third key. If you don't know, think of assistant manager, basically. I take the position thinking it's for the store I work at, but instead, I get moved over to the mall store, who already had a third key. A store never had two third keys, so I was curious to say the least. I find out my first shift at the new position that I'm actually replacing the third key who was being fired, right now in the office in the back. My eyes bug out a bit because the dude was unique, to say the least. Skinny as a rail, long black hair, brought a cube of must do code red every shift and downed it all by the end of the shift. How was he skinny? Kept his hair in a ponytail. This becomes important. I also find out the why he's being fired as the manager, and guy to be fired is taking way too long in the back office for a simple firing. It was just after the holiday rush, and during a super busy time, an older lady wanted to buy Cabela's Big Game Hunter. Ex-third key says, "You don't want this, it's a terrible game." The lady said her husband specifically asked for this specific game, but the guy just trashed the game and literally would not sell it to her, as many angry patrons were waiting behind her. Naturally, he was fired. As I'm told this, they still haven't left the back office. It's dead as a doornail, an unstable guy is getting fired. I'm replacing him. I was a little worried when and how he was leaving the premises. Finally, dude comes out, eyes super red from crying. Felt a bit bad for him despite breaking the one rule you have in retail, ducking sell thing. He gets to the precipice where he's about to step from the store out into the mall proper itself, pulls his hair tie out while spinning to face the store, hair going everywhere, and yells at the top of his lungs, "The legend will never die." And he just immediately bolts, full pelt, running for the mall exit. Never heard from him again. For reference, what he yelled is from the game series Soul Calibur. Hope he's doing better nowadays, but honestly, couldn't even remember his name. I remember how he left the store though. Story 17. He took the company car home without authorization. That wasn't enough to get fired. It was late, and he lived 10 minutes away in Brooklyn. He used company car to pick up his brother in Queens. That wasn't enough to get fired. He hit a pedestrian while picking up his brother in Queens with the company car that he took without authorization. That might do it. He fled the scene of the accident after hitting a pedestrian while picking up his brother with the company car that he took without authorization. He got fired so fast. Story 18. My supervisor got really comfortable at his job. They hired me because he was swamped with work orders. There were over 70 in the system. It's a mutual-owned community with 248 units. The buildings are over 80 years old, so the plumbing and electrical are past needing an overhaul. A lot of units were gutted and brought up to code. We are only responsible for the outside of the building and plumbing, and electrical. The job really isn't that hard. He was fired shortly after I started, and I run this place by myself and kept around 8 work orders in the system. I started to notice my supervisor's constant lying. He really didn't do anything but cut grass and sit at his desk. This is why he got overloaded. To make him look productive, he would mark work orders as completed in the system and not doing the work. The place gives 8 extra hours just for being on call. If called in, it's 3 hours of overtime plus an hour of drive time. I would hear 3 or 4 times a week how he got called in. They wanted to rotate us weekly, but he said he was okay with keeping the phones. He would then report his hours and make like 15-20 hours of overtime. Never punched in after hours, and never put in the system what was done and where. I was sent on a run to get a part that was never ordered. I was lied to, and this really pissed me off. That's when I started paying attention. He was always taking his truck to get drinks for the office. I would help carry stuff in, and notice a lot of drinks and food would stay in the truck. He said he paid with his own money. Then I caught him in a lie about needing gas in the work truck and cans just after he said the same, and took his truck. I kept quiet, but not for long. I wanted to go to the board about using the CC for things outside of work. The complaints started coming in about work orders not being done. This was my time. It was only a week or so. The office manager and I were hired at the same time and both caught on. He was also buying ludicrous tools we didn't need and even bought lawn equipment and took it home. Manager and I went to the board and they started an investigation. He was suspended without pay once some of the evidence came in. Residents were questioned. On suspension, I was on call. The weird thing was, I might have been called in maybe once every 2 weeks. He was making bank off bogus overtime. He was filling up his truck once a week. He was shopping for himself on their credit card, and he was not doing the work that was supposed to be done. He was fired immediately. Should have. Theft charges brought against him, but didn't. I was immediately promoted, given a nice raise, and full control of the complex. It's taken a year to get this place under control. Calls come in much less. I've saved the place countless dollars. This job isn't that hard. Do the calls when they come in. Don't steal. Story 19. Stealing a car from the dealership where he worked as a salesperson. Yes, he showed up to work the next day with the car as if it was totally fine. GM did not press charges, but he sure as crap fired the duck out of him. Story 20. Had to fire someone just a few weeks ago. He was a new hire, and in 3 weeks, he called out 5 times. I wrote him up for poor attendance, and just 2 days later, he was a no-show, no call when we had 2 deliveries going out. Driver, HVAC equipment. Left me no choice. Story 21. He was stealing things. Another just showed up whenever he felt like it. We need you here at 7 a.m. He shows up about 11 a.m. Another walked off the job. One was sleeping on the job. Another got hired, then walked off mid-shift. Duck this place. He was fired, quit. A woman was in the company car, driving around with the cell phone in her ear, shirt off, no belt buckle. The regional director saw it. She was asked to pull into management parking. She stepped out of the car and was literally fired on the spot. Another for threatening coworkers. One of the coworkers called the police. She was called into the office where she was told the threats are being investigated. She then had a truly epic rant and threatened everyone. She was fired. Management was seconds away from calling the police. She keyed the manager's car when leaving. Story 22, department store. I worked at about 20 years ago. I was 20 at the time, working their shoe department, and I worked with this other person the same age, maybe a year younger. She was apparently ringing in gift cards under my number, but no currency exchanged. I rarely closed, and back then we just took our tills up to the cash room and someone there would do the counts early the next morning. Never knew it was happening until the LP officer came down and asked her to come to the office. She screwed up by doing this on days I wasn't at work, and I'd been watching for several weeks without any clue. On days I worked, the transactions were done when I was on break. I'm so glad they did their due diligence. Story 23. Once worked at a big online retailer, not Amazon. We had 3 warehouses we shipped out of. One was smaller and only held one specific brand of item. The warehouse manager of that warehouse was fired and arrested at work. Turned out he was fulfilling orders, printing labels with correct addresses which would be emailed to the client. Then he would, the next day, do redirects through the FedEx system and assign new tracking numbers so the old ones wouldn't show final delivery address, just that it was changed. Everything got redirected to his house. He then was relisting the same items on eBay under a very similar company name to the one he actually worked for. Story 24, background. We are a shop in small 1,200-person town. We have one gas station, a bar, and a Dollar General, and our office, of course. COVID made things slow. We didn't get nearly as many orders, and as a result, there were times where you might not see any work during your shift. Well, we have a day shift and a night shift. Night shift is to keep various machines running if we did have orders in for them. Our night crew is around 5 people through the whole building. My office has 2 of them, and they are both lazy bums. Well, our old CEO retired and a new one came in. The new guy is cool and will put up with a lot of things, but dishonesty is not one of them. Oh, and the new CEO moved into the small town to be near work, and he walks in the evenings. One of the night guys started going across the street to the gas station every night and stayed over there for several hours playing the video slots, then he'd come back and clock out. Gas station ladies notice the dude and talk to other employees asking if he works with us. Because why else would some person from out of town be in the gas station playing slots at night instead of the bar? Eventually it spreads around town and the new CEO catches wind of it. He decides to give the person the benefit of the doubt at first, and that person squandered their second chance. CEO is on one of his night runs and goes in front of the office, happening to meet the employee as they are walking across the street. Employees say they are on lunch and going to get some chips from the gas station. CEO says, "Have a good night," and then continues his walk. On his way back, however, he goes into his office and checks the time punches. That employee already took their lunch 2 hours prior. CEO decides to wait a bit and just so happens to be returning from his walk when the employee is coming back from the gas station 3 hours later. CEO calls the employee out and tells them they can finish out the week if they want, but their job is terminated. Story 25. I'm a nurse, and at the time I was working in the ICU. This was during one of the pandemic waves. So staffing was tight, and we had a few travel nurses working on the unit with us to help. One of the travelers made the conscious decision to bolus an entire bottle of propofol, which is a sedative we use to keep patients asleep when they are on a ventilator. The drug is also very good at stopping your breathing and dropping your blood pressure very quickly if you give it quickly. Needless to say, the patient coded, and we had to reverse the effects of the drug and resuscitate them. After finding out what caused the code, that traveler was crap canned on the spot. No clue why she would willingly drain the entire bottle into the patient when we use programmable IV pumps and many other fail-safes to prevent this sort of thing. But yeah, negligence or whatever, nearly lost a patient that night. Story 26, I've known two. First was uploading CP to the internet using company-ed equipment. A girl from HR posted his P45 through a gap in the police car window as he was driven away. Everyone thought he was off, but we had no idea how off he was. Second, we used company funds to bring the secretary he was having an affair with to a meeting team building event in London. He's just been promoted to director, so he flushed his $250,000 PA job, his stock options, and his marriage down the shifter in one go. Muppet. Story 27. Architectural residential drafter here. The guy was hired on because his dad was high up in our plumbing company we purchased at the time. The guy didn't have a college degree but was willing to learn and worked in plumbing. We thought he'd bring ideas and solutions to help our plumbers in the field install fixtures. When we asked him technical questions, he didn't know the answer. Then it turned into him screwing up houses where buyers added on their third car garages, sunrooms, covered patios, etc., costing us a few thousand. He took zero accountability, and not only that, blamed a different drafter, including myself, on big mess-ups. This guy had zero office etiquette and would annoy the hell out of everyone in the office. And because of this, he was behind on work. He would do everything in his power to participate in all work activities to get out of doing work. He showed up late at least once a week, like 3 hours late. He also would give unsolicited advice about losing weight and how he was healthier than most people there. He gained 30 pounds from when he started to being fired. When he was put on probation for a month, he refused to do any changes to prints and make others do it, so he couldn't, in theory, mess up. The company was basically paying him to give others work and be a burden at the same time. My manager called me when I went out on an emergency family issue to tell me they fired him, and I was not surprised, and I celebrated it. I announced to family with the biggest ducking smile on my face because they knew how much this guy irritated me. I forgot to mention that he worked in plumbing, digging ditches for the plumbers. Story 28. Employee A and B both are bankers. Employee A is responsible for cards and employee B is responsible for PIN codes. A had client. The client card got stolen while out of the country, so A issued a new card and sent it to him. A forgot to give him the envelope with the new PIN, so the employee A asks employee B about the envelope and if he can take a look to make sure it's the correct one. A calls the client, opens the envelope, and gives the PIN code, and everyone was happy. In fact, the customer was so happy he called the management praising employee A and how he saved from a nightmare by giving him his PIN code through a phone call. Management thanked the client and ended the call. Next day, employee A was fired. Employee B was a well-known and excellent worker and loved by everyone. They gave him an option to either get fired or resign and find another job with a good recommendation letter. He was confused because it's not him who sent the code, but because he was responsible for the codes. They said he should have checked and made sure the code is safe, but he didn't. In here, if you get fired, company won't pay for end-of-service bonuses, so they just pay his wages, and that's it. If you resign, you get end-of-service bonuses. The reason behind this is because it's a major security risk. No one should open the envelope that has the customer card or PIN without the client being physically in front of the worker, even though everything turned out okay. But it's one of the first things they make sure everyone understands before taking the job. If only the client was not too excited and called to praise the worker, both A and B would still have their job. Story 29. We had a super micromanager who thought he was the best. If he knew you were a work bee, he would treat you like crap and felt proud. One day we had an outage and everyone joined the call. Micromanager got on the call and ran the show like a dictator. He assumed everyone on the call were worker bees. He yelled at everyone and dictated their tasks. What he does not know was one of the caller was a VP from another department. Normally VP do not join our call, but this one was a new VP, and he jumped on the call. Micromanager got into his rhythm and started second-guessing the VP, and it got heated. We all looked up the new guy in the directory and knew he was the VP, but no one said anything. This was the first person that stood up to Micromanager and questioned him. It got so heated, Micromanager started calling VP names and actually swore at him. After 30 minutes of heated discussion, Aish got involved and separated the two. Micromanager found out it was the VP, but it was too late. I don't know what was said with HR, VP, and Micromanager, but he was not allowed back on the call. HR forced him to take a few courses and he was put on the performance improvement plan. He did treat us a bit better, but still condescending. A few months later, we had a small laid-off in the company and micromanager was on the hit list. He did not leave without fighting, threw his phone on the floor and swore at HR. Physical security had to be involved to escort him out. A few times in my life where I felt justice was severed and I was on the side of the company. When they walked him past my cubicle, it was an early Christmas gift in Story 30. At a grocery store, guy told the store manager to kiss his ass. At an internet install company, guy was in training. He was set to ride along with his trainer. Guy would log his hours every day, but he never met with trainer. Company asked trainer how he was doing, and trainer said he stopped showing up X amount of days ago. Story 31. He was really creepy toward other associates, myself included. I also witnessed him flirting with a woman trying to shop and thought it was weird. He followed me on Instagram and would comment hard eyes on pictures of my friend and I. I guess he went far with another associate who spoke up, and all of us at work had to write down the creepy things he was doing. And they compiled it all and fired him, Story 32. During the first week, our guy managed to make the whole team uncomfortable with his presence. Our guy was a heavy drug user and a creep on top of that. This takes skill. Late from third day, even though we are working from home, because he just got home from custody for breaking a window of a bus. And yes, police involved also got charged with possession of substances. At the very same day during training that I held, our guy just stated that he didn't sleep for 3 days and needs some rest. So he is going to sleep now. Literally couldn't react to this. He took it as an, okay, sure, go ahead, in 0.5 seconds. And after the whole stuff, we obviously had to fire the guy. And then comes the final act, a wall of text to my manager about how he is, my manager, is a junkie and the whole group is, and we should duck off, all of us. Guy is doing jail time as far as I know right now. Good times. Story 33, salesman addicted to frequent flyer points. He'd book flights with 4 segments each way, meaning extra nights in hotels and basically doing almost no work 2 days a week. He was told repeatedly to book direct flights, but just wouldn't. Story 34. Was working as a shift leader at a fast food restaurant where we have always been far too less employees for far too much work. So it was very unusual to give someone the sack. But that one guy decided to call me for telling me he is sick and can't come to work. On what was known as the worst day of the year in our company, first day of school, where we literally had to deal with 200 orders each ducking hour for the whole day and have been lacking staff anyway. So it was horrible. Until that one guy literally showed up at evening hours as a ducking customer together with his friends, being nothing near to sick, but in his best mood, expecting us to serve him after he completely let us down and ducked everything up. So I decided to cancel their order, walked over to their table to hand them their money back, as they won't be served today, and told that one guy that he doesn't need to show up at any point in the future before telling them to get the duck out, as I am really busy. I was not authorized to fire someone, as that was the restaurant leader's job and only happened, if ever, after it was discussed together as a team in our meetings. But I anyway did it and called the restaurant leader after the shift to tell her what happened. And as she said that I'm not allowed to decide that on my own, I told her it's him or me. So she sticked by it. And it was literally the only positive thing happening to me that ducking day. Story 35. This guy can't really be called a Kevin. He was smart, but he let his beliefs and opinions run out of his mouth before his brain had time to think. Worked with him for years. Pretty sure he was sleeping with a boss or something, but he was banned from entering certain areas if certain people were present because it would either lead to him getting beaten to a pulp, a lawsuit, or both. Somehow this guy was a manager, mind you, and wasn't well liked at all. He was finally fired on a very busy day. We had a lot going on, and 2 employees were taking a quick breather. He comes up to them and says something along the lines of, "Both of you slacking off again? I see how it is. Monkey see, monkey do." And these 2 employees happened to be black. This was also heard by a dozen plus other employees, and well, no way to recover from that. Before he could start to backpedal on his words, he was fired. Story 36. Gave Indian scammers access to her computer and therefore to the company's servers. I have no idea if there were any financial losses, but the CEO was pissed. We had a security training workshop the week after that, and the way people treat sensible information. My God. Story 37. Came to work at my restaurant job in Boston. Opened the door to change into my work clothes and found good old Jonathan naked laying on the toilet, passed out from being drunk on the job. Probably around 4 p.m., dude would sneak drinks while serving. I remember one time he came to work excited to show everyone an enormous bruise he got from an encounter he had the day before. Dude had a lot going on all of the time. Also at that same restaurant, a guy almost got arrested for gang activity. The cops came in looking for him one morning. They had cars on each corner and everything. I thought he was a nice guy, but apparently he was doing some wild crap in Brockton. Lastly, we had a general manager who was the worst I've ever seen, Not an evil guy, just incompetent at an impressive level. Our restaurant serves expensive lobsters. Can't tell you how many times GM Steve would duck up an order and drop off the wrong food at the wrong table. All the time. Whole tables wrong. He would solve this by giving these tables gift cards of 100 or 200. What we didn't know was that none of these gift cards were activated, and so many people would come in after he was fired to have a nice meal, only discovered that the cards had nothing on them. This lasted for months after he was fired. Good times. Story 38. I worked with a man who shared the same name as a world-famous basketball player. He was named that name well after his namesake had risen to prominence, but importantly, was not named after him. On our third month of working together, cashier at Lowe's Hardware, he turned to me and said, "I hate this job so much. My dad says I can't quit, but didn't say anything about getting fired. What happened?" Next will be seared into my mind until my last breath. He approached the first customer he made eye contact with. He said simply, "Hi, is there anything I can help you find?" To which the customer replied, "Just looking for your cement mix." My friend answered, "Oh, that is just down aisle 20. Can I help you pour it down your asshole?" That was the day Michael was fired. Story 39. Kept missing work because he slept in after staying up all night playing WoW. Also, we had another guy fired because he harassed literally every female at our office. This was also like 2 months after he had just gotten married. Story 40. He was a machine mechanic at the pickle factory I worked at. He got fired for putting his junk in the slicer. As for the pickle slicer, she got fired too. Story 41. Flipped out and attacked the manager at the front desk. Had to be escorted out by police. Few months later, I saw in the paper that he'd been arrested for threatening a neighbor with a knife. Can't say I was shocked. Story 42. Industrial electrical during construction of a precious metals processing plant. A member of my crew who looked like Beetlejuice had an oxy problem. We had no idea until after he was laid off. He'd attend the morning job box meeting, then he'd head off to the crafter, sit backwards on the toilet, and from the privacy of his bathroom stall, crush up some substances on the back of the toilet and happily ingest said substances. Once he was good and high, he'd sneak off to a special hiding place he made for himself way up in the bowels of the scaffolding. He made an intricate hoarding and even constructed a bed with padding using materials he found on site. There, he'd spend most of his day sleeping off the oxy and would come out within the last 2 hours of the day to do some work. It's rare to get fired from this site. You are just laid off at the whim of the construction company. When he was laid off, he was told to come to the office for a meeting. Knowing a layoff was imminent, he packed up several drills and batteries, including the very one I had signed out of the tool crib, and somehow made his way past security with them. Story 43. Stole from the company, harassed nearly all the women in his office, discriminated against women in pokey, inappropriate touching, and the whole 9 yards. He is a terrible human being. That a-hole had the nerve to contact me from his new company to sell a CRM system. Like, dude, I wouldn't put water on you if you were on fire. It took way too long to fire him. He threw a huge tantrum and destroyed his laptop in the parking lot. Story 44. When the new investor came in, they fired everybody who wasn't suitable for their planned ED&I and high-performing culture. Got rid of 50% staff, gave all of them a golden handshake, many of them multiple years gardening leave, just to get them away from the remaining workforce. They essentially got rid of all the toxic people, hired new staff that fit the planned culture, raised salaries, annual leave, and bonuses, installed massive mental health and professional development programs, turned a garbage company that lost billions every year into a profitable company that's making billions every year. It's been 5 years since. Best place I've ever worked at. Unfortunately, it's coming to an end. It's an investor, so they're currently looking to sell the business to get their money back, plus a bit of extra cash. SPA has been signed and deal will be finalized in a few weeks. Massive layoffs will happen. But the investor pulled another great thing. Everybody will have guaranteed salary and bonuses for 2 years after deal closure. My position won't be needed anymore, so I'm looking forward to my golden handshake and gardening leave on top of my 2-year salary. I could need some time off after excessively hustling for the past 15 years. Story 45. He was bat crap crazy. One day, the guy decided to take off all his clothes in the locker room, started running around naked and set a table on fire. Guy was subdued, arrested, and fired. Story 46. Worked at a theater. He kept disappearing when things got busy. We thought maybe he was just going into the theaters to clean like we always do, but he'd be gone for long periods with nobody having seen him. We eventually found him sleeping in a janitor's closet. Story 47. He was stalking someone who worked in a different department at the facility, whom he had met on Grindr, and deducted that he worked in the same place despite the person not having that information posted anywhere. He attempted to give him a dirty, explicit letter that instead ended up in the hands of the floor manager. He also outed the person he was stalking in the process. Story 48. Dude never looked up from his phone during my whole interview. Seemed sus. Now I know why. He got busted in it to catch a predator sting. Didn't make the show, though. Story 49. When I worked at a restaurant a year ago, we hired a new server. He flirted with everyone. And at first, we just thought he was being goofy and charming, because he would even flirt with old people, which initially was kind of cute. He was openly bisexual, so no one was off limits. We tried talking to him about it, but the thing is, he would come into work high, and he was just way too relaxed and kept flirting with everything that moved. Well, after the manager told him he was on thin ice, he walked up to an employee the next day and propositioned her for sex in a pretty crude way, and she called crying, and that was the end of that. Story 50. I worked at a country club that doubled as a wedding reception celebration location. We had a lot of liquor on hand, and minus what was being used, it was all held in a room downstairs. This kid saw it, and he was a new hire and 18 years old, kept asking questions like, when was the room downstairs restocked? What was kept down there, and etc. I figured he just liked to drink. I'm from a small area with little to do. He began to work, and he was a great worker. We were allowed smoke breaks, so he'd go outside and smoke during every shift. Turns out, he wasn't going outside at all, but going downstairs and taking fifths of booze, packs of beer, and even some bottles of wine, one at a time. It was discovered when our manager went to the monthly inventory, and the missing product didn't match the bar use records. He got fired over like $400 of alcohol. I wish he'd been smarter and not done that, but here we are. Story 51. Two guys were welding, and both wanted to play their music on the radio over the shop. One got upset and shoved the other from behind. The other turned around and punched him in the face, all while welding equipment was live. Both got fired almost immediately. Later found out that one of the guys was going around bragging about how he ducked me and how dirty of a girl I was. Def not true, he was a total loser. I really appreciate that my fellow co-workers looked out and stood up for me. Story 52. Worked for a cable company, sales. There was a code IDK why it was there, if we couldn't use it, but whatever. So the code would let you add a home phone to their bill, also while lowering it by $20. He would do that to anyone and just say he lowered their bill as a courtesy. Next month, people would come back with their bill upset about an unknown phone on it. We'd send them to him. At one point, he'd have a line of people to see just him because of what he did. Our manager caught on because she looked at sales. He had 25 home phones in a month. Average was around 4. Launched an investigation, and he was fired because of it. Story 53. She was fired for trying to start a rumble in the parking lot with the person who stole her promotion. Right in front of an exit, so full view of the cameras. Story 54. No reason, my company sucks. He was one of the hardest working, smart, dedicated person in our office. Some idiot CFO in another county decided to fire everyone in a certain position without thinking to check if they were in the middle of a bunch of projects and were completely essential to the region they were in. Now we're all scrambling to fill his spots on all the projects. I always knew corporations didn't care, but wow, it's worse than I imagined. Story 55. Was a girl for my job. Total Karen to literally everyone. Chose a victim and relentlessly picked on him. Got called out by many of us for doing so, and she eventually filed a harassment accusation against him. He got separated from the workforce while it was investigated since he was the accused. They questioned all of us, and when she was questioned about times and dates when she was harassed, she could only come up with vague bullcrap like, it just happened so much, and it was just every time I saw him. They again would ask, okay, give us a specific time, doesn't need to be all of them. Just like every time. It's too hard to point out a specific moment. They obviously could see through the bullcrap, and with the questioning moving to everyone else, much more about how she was in work, she always slacked on came to light. So essentially, her attempt at creating a crap storm for this guy opened up her own world of problems. She was gone not long after. Story 56. Small HVAC outfit, my father and myself hired a friend that quit a larger company. It wasn't one thing, but a series of them. He drilled through a wall into a customer's couch. He spent 2 days moving a furnace and duct run for a remodel. Easy job, everything one arm to the side, except he moved it all 6. We had even outlined a big square indicating where the furnace had to sit. He was left to finish some ducting at a cabin, came back 2 hours to find him gone, called to ask where he went. He was invited fishing. Numerous days where he proclaimed at 2 o'clock that he had go home right then, at jobs that were half done and 30+ minutes away from the shop. On multiple occasions, they used the wrong refrigerant. Frequently had to be followed up with rework due to bad brazing, not leak checking systems. While working at a bar, went to the bar and ordered a drink, sat there and finished it 3 times during one job. Yeah, it wasn't a good time. Sucks when something like a bad work ethic ruins a friendship. Story 57. 1, she had met or some other drug in her lockers or lunchbox in employee fridge. 2, a different employee threatened to quit if employee B wasn't fired because she wouldn't stop abusing medication. Employee B found Prozac or something in a pile of donated clothes. She took it. She could become real nasty when high and the supers would just send her home. Yes, she had crashed when driving, still no repercussions. This was less than 3 years ago. I still hurt for her, she has since passed away. But she did everything right, career, hubby, house. But she suffered from early menopause at about 27, I think. She knew how deeply my struggles with fertility affected me, but ignored how hers affected her. She needed help, but refused it. Story 59. My brother does HVAC, had a lead guy with a company vehicle who was an alcoholic. Boss man became aware of it and told him he cannot be drinking before or during work and to get his crap together. One more slip up and he's gone. Dude was apparently very apologetic and said it wouldn't happen again. Then the next week, another lead guy suspected and opened Drunkard's cooler, and wouldn't you know it, a 6-pack of Bud Light with 2 empty bottles at 10 a.m. Called their boss, and he said, "Go ahead and tell him to find a ride home. It'll mail him his last check." My brother had to drive the company van back to their shop that day. Story 60. He was having an affair with a woman on his team. Supposedly, they had sex in his car on lunch breaks. She may have been paid for more hours than she worked. Story 61. He had Tourette syndrome and some other mental health issues. Would slam crap all over the kitchen and generally be a disturbance. We called him Crash. What got him fired, though, was he had a habit of chewing on the end of broomsticks, and one day a customer saw him do so and complained. It was something management generally looked the other way on, but after that, they were forced to let him go. Story 62. He has a crazy baby mama that wouldn't stop calling every possible phone she could in our workspace, looking for him. We work in a big space. Not everybody knows everybody. If someone answered the phone who didn't know him or wouldn't help her, she would scream and cuss at you until you hung up. She would call literally 30+ times a shift looking for him. Eventually, he got fired because she showed up from 4 states away looking for him, apparently by bus, and got through a badge access, only door with their kid. He got fired because everybody was afraid she was going to hit us. Story 63. This was many, many years ago in a small local running shoe store. Not very busy during weekdays, so sometimes just 1 or 2 people work at a time. Store was so small, we didn't even have a restroom. So if we were working alone, we would have to lock the store and put up a back in 5 minutes sign. Dude wanted to go to some beer fest in a city a few hours away, wanted to leave at 2:00, but was scheduled to work alone until 4:00. None of us could come in at 2:00 because we were all college students, but one girl offered to come in at 3:00. Instead of waiting for her, he locked the doors at 2:00, put up the back in 5 minutes sign, and took off. She showed up at 3:00 to a line of people at the door and the phone ringing off the hook. Story 64. He was a total a-hole, a man-child, and a compulsive liar. He was an award-winning chef, but he couldn't hang with dinner rush at a pizza place. He was an Army paratrooper, but he'd never jump out of a plane ever. He'd rather die. Except actually, he was a skydiving instructor in Army Reserve and served in Afghanistan. One time I was talking to another coworker about the concept of bounty hunting, and he got all in arms about it because he was a bounty hunter in Texas for 10 years, and it's not actually bounty hunting, and it's nothing like that. This loser with so much claimed valor would throw a fit if he had to make more than 2 pizzas at once. Finally, we got tired of him and gave him the boot. Never saw him again. Story 65. The sweetest, quietest, most conservative lady I've ever met turned out to be the biggest crook I've known. Her and a small group of people successfully defrauded hundreds, thousands of people of over 30 million through those bullcrap cray scam calls. She hid the money by buying multiple properties under other people's names and jewelry sales. Eventually, she got caught and ended up on the news. I saw her walk into the office the next Monday, we worked together, and then walk right back out after, talking to the boss. She never did any jail time, even though she stole more money than most thieves do when they commit violent bank robberies. Story 66. About 6 months ago, I started receiving complaints about this one worker. I guess he was falling asleep at the register while checking customers out. Mind you, there's only one employee on shift most of the time, so he's here by himself and falling asleep. The complaints were all at different dates and times, so I can't even call it a one-time issue, which is forgivable if inventory is correct. So when inventory count comes back for some stuff missing, I have no choice but to fire him and finish his shift. He was sleeping when I came in to fire him. I didn't wake him up until I counted his drawer down and clocked him out. He needs his sleep, you know? He was mad. Left in such a hurry, he left his substances in the employee's bathroom. Story 67. He watched Family Guy at his desk on his work laptop. No headphones. He frequently ignored customer calls. He, I guess, had another gig as a bouncer at a strip club and so extended an invitation to a female colleague to come try out for a job. He still was around for a while after this incident, though. He was part of a big group of temps we brought in to support a product launch. Out of like 10 people, half were gone within days, and then only 2 lasted long enough to get hired. And then one of them stopped showing up without any explanation. All the managers kept asking us if we had heard anything from her. I was so confused as a temptation to hire myself. The job was amazing pay and not hard at all. Story 68. Michael. Michael was the manager of a liquor importing business. Michael was very ambitious and placed orders with his suppliers for over 200 sea containers a month of alcohol to be shipped. First month, what the duck are we supposed to do with all these cartons? Second month, why the duck are more sea containers being dropped here? What the duck is going on? Owners screaming to suppliers to stop sending containers. Third month, 200 more containers that were already shipped arrived, and the entire property inside and out had cartons of alcohol stacked up in the car park, in dirt, literally everywhere. Michael managed to sell about 80 containers of alcohol at this point, and there were still more containers that would arrive. I have never seen anyone get verbally demolished more than Michael. Duck you, Michael. Story 69. It was a one-man job in shifts, dealing with comparably big amounts of money. Was a really chill guy, honestly. Boss started watching back the security footage after some minor thing got damaged. Didn't got destroyed, only some scratches. The GF of said guy was with him on all shifts. Nobody knew her at the time. She was just a random woman for all of us. He got fired after the boss saw that his GF took all of the tips from everyone else multiple times. Tip jar. Story 70. Kept catching him making himself drinks and eating food without paying for it. That, and he'd hide in random places and play on his Switch when he was supposed to be working. Tried banning him from bringing his Switch to work with him. He started to bring his 3DS and repeated his actions. Finally, we got fed up when we were swamped and I needed help up front. He didn't show, and I caught him on his cell phone playing Fortnite with his headphones in. Fired him on the spot. His mother came in a few days later after finding out he was fired and yelling at me. The dude was in his early 20s. Story 71. He was stealing coupons that were printed out at the check stand meant for the customers. When he was called back to the office and told to empty out his apron, he panicked and went for the office door. The assistant manager, a little woman about 5 feet tall and barely 90-sums, soaking wet, was in his way, so he lowered his shoulder and body blocked her. She went flying. He ran out of the office and was in the employee bathrooms trying to flush the coupons down the toilet. The assistant manager was okay, but he was immediately suspended and fired. 25 years down the drain. They were just going to give him a verbal warning and make him throw away the coupons, which he did not need. He was just a cheapskate. Story 72. I work as an industrial mechanic, and we had this new helper come in. He was a nice enough kid, but boy did he think he knew everything. He was there for maybe 3 months, and I could spend about a month jawing on how many stupid things he did. For example, he would get warned to stand clear of us cutting overhead pipe, then still find himself inches from falling steel. But the icing on the cake is when the big boss specifically told him not to mess with a broken hatch door. Like I'm talking a steel 10x10 hatch. He ignored the boss and hooked up one of those ceiling-mounted electric cable hoists to the door and started to lift. Absolutely ripped the doors off the hinges. Didn't see him again after that. Story 73. One guy, sales, didn't sell anything for a year. One guy, developer, always talked about solutions and answers and actually had great theory, but didn't actually check anything in for months. His reason was he was above that and more suited for architecture work. One guy, director at a company outing, was told he didn't have the balls to do something and responded by dropping trow to show off the twigs and berries to prove her wrong in the middle of the cookout. Story 74. Took a crap in a plastic bag and left it in the work truck overnight. Also refused to take people to the bathroom if they needed to go while at a site. Crafty guy, no pun intended. Story 75. I was working at Best Buy fresh out of college on the registers and customer service desk. An older lady came in asking for a return out of our typical policy date. I denied it, but she was being insistent, so I called over the manager. For some reason, he overrode the system and processed the return for her. Next week, same supervisor comes to me and says, "We need to have a talk because I messed up allowing a return through. I shouldn't have." I looked at him confused and asked if he meant that lady because I didn't even have the credentials to process the return, and it had to have been him. He said something like, "Oh crap," and walked off. He didn't come back after that day. Story 76. At my last job, they opened 2 attempts to hire positions and filled them both. One guy was great, the other was odd. The company had a no working from home policy, but the odd temp tried pushing a WFH agenda. I was in support of it, but he kept bringing it up and bringing it up. Every meeting, every opportunity, including the day we were introduced to a new CIO, smallish company that was growing, but still had small business mindset. Anyways, he got annoyed that it wasn't happening, so he started applying to other jobs. Stopped wearing slacks and polos and instead wore blue jeans and t-shirts every day and started doing phone interviews or scheduling interviews from his desk. He was fired about 2 weeks after Story 77. He was stealing parts and selling them on eBay. Another tech was looking for a hard-to-find part on eBay and noticed one selling from our city. The picture was at one of our company's desks with our company mug and frame. The director was notified, and our director purchased the part using his personal eBay account and had it shipped to his home address. Shipping was sent through our corporate account even. Day the package showed up, our director left work, picked up the package, and returned straight to HR. Dude was fired while denying the whole situation. Legal informed him it was termination with cause, and any potential court or government action will require legal to fully investigate the matter. We never heard from Dude again. Story 78. I work at a tech support company, and a coworker had a bad day, and some Karen called and gave him the business, and he hit the mute button and said out loud, "Why do I always get the a-holes?" And he didn't hit that mute button, and Karen heard it all. Story 79. He would call in sick at least once every week after staying up all night playing video games. This isn't speculation. I know him outside of work and know how he spends his personal time. He was busted sleeping in a government-owned vehicle on multiple occasions. I'm not talking just catching a few winks here. I am talking full-on, laid out in the back seat with a blanket, and being so deeply asleep that knocking on the window didn't disturb him. He only woke up when a cop was called to perform a well check because someone at the location thought he was homeless. The deputy had to open the door and shake him awake. Our boss finally cut him loose after that. Story 80. I started working admits at a hospital. My coworker, who was here for 2 years before me, she would take multiple muscle relaxers, drink a bunch of sugary drinks, diabetic and overweight, and pretty much put herself into a diabetic coma for a few hours, passing in and out. It took me 4 months to get my supervisors to do anything about it. They knew about this and witnessed it a year before I started. So finally I told them I was going to quit from the embarrassment and her not being dealt with, and bam, she was gone. Story 81. Technically, he was fired for showing up late for like the 10th time in a row. However, it turns out that he was an addict and was late because he was scoring. After getting canned, he stole a customer's car. It was an auto repair shop. Drove it high and hit the edge of a boat launch, badly damaging the car, almost $1,000 in damages, and caused an off-duty cop who was fishing off of the boat launch to have to jump out of the way to avoid being hit. He had substances on him when the accident occurred. It turns out he was on parole for previous drug offenses and went to jail for a long while after that. Story 82. He got arrested for DV but told everyone he got a DUI. We live in a small town, so the owner looks at the sheriff's arrest logs all the time, and he saw this guy on there and fired him right away. This dude shows up a week later, all strung out looking, trying to clock in, but the machine wouldn't work for him. We were like, "Dude, you were fired." And he said, "What? What for?" We just told him to go to the office, and he didn't see him again for a few weeks when he happened to be walking down the street looking like crap. Story 83. A new hire started acting like he was the boss of the women in his section. He was not hired as a manager, and they were all far more qualified than him. He was shown the door as soon as our CEO found out what was going on. Story 84. Insurance-based company I worked for had no solid process for salvage items. Basically, items were left in a cupboard that magically never filled up. Guy was stealing old damaged phones, tablets, laptops, camera, etc., and selling them as damaged on eBay with the insurance reason included. Someone asked for their damaged laptop back. It wasn't in the cupboard. Story 85. He told everyone, and their mother, he was quitting and leaving on our busiest day just to duck over the owner. Told me last, and I told the boss because he's like a dad to me. Boss knew because the bar owner, several patrons, and a few guys from our parts store had already told him. But because I was last to find out, he made threats against me. And then, when boss confronted him, he fired him for both. Now he's been calling for weeks to harass my boss, who's in his 60s, threatening to fight him, but won't set foot near the store when I'm there, because he knows I'll kick his ass myself. Story 86. Well, he slept with our boss's wife, and had the audacity to do so while he was on the clock with one of our most important clients. The client was left unattended and ignored, leading him to start using the services of our competitors too. To add insult to injury, he had the gall to start legal proceedings for unfair dismissal, leading the boss to have to lose time, and ended up nearly bankrupting him due to not being able to focus on our clients. The boss's wife died later that year due to a stroke at 46, so he was left an utter mess. Story 87. When we were still working from home full-time, one dude was fired because he would just come to our stand-ups drunk, yes, dead drunk at 10 in the morning. Story 88. Coming in high out of his mind on downers, was so disoriented that they put him in a cab and he had no idea what happened the next morning. Guy was going through a tough time at home, so I felt bad, but it was pretty jarring to see first thing on a Monday morning. Story 89. A manager in a department I worked in was fired due to an inappropriate relationship with his direct report. It was definitely suspected by many in the department. She was always in his office, with the door closed and barely ever at her desk. They would schedule meetings and be off-site for hours. He was going through a messy divorce, and a nosy coworker looked up his case and found his direct report was used as a character witness. She went to HR. Many in the department were mad at the nosy coworker for getting him fired. I thought he deserved it by knowingly violating company policy. Story 90. Worked at JCPenney's in college for 4 years, and shockingly every year someone would steal money around Christmas time and get fired. Another company I worked for had a guy go through 2 weeks of vacation in under 2 months. We were launching a new program, and we were expecting tons of people to be contacting us via phone and email. So, the week we launched was a blackout week that no one could have off. He called in the first 3 days of that week, even though he had no more vacation time. When he came back to work, he was fernted. Story 91. A substitute teacher who always wore kilts in the US got fired for telling a middle schooler he'd date her if she was just a little older. I'm in front of the whole class, mind you. Story 92. First guy I ever fired had pulled out his junk at work and waved it at a girl he liked. The girl didn't mind, but an old lady saw him and reported it. His last name was Hancock. Not kidding. Story 93. Worked in telecom back when 1-900 sex numbers were a thing. Coworker would hang out in the wiring closet and use his lineman's test set to get his jollies. Customers got the bills and started calling the office to complain. Duh. Bosses compared dates with service records. Dude was history. Story 94. New manager at the bike shop made it a rule we had to eat lunch in the break room instead of at the counter. Makes sense to me, but it was kind of a vibe down not being able to eat around the guys. One guy, old retired man who worked part-time for fun, could not get over the rule change and said the new manager was a tyrant. He just got scheduled less and less until he never got scheduled. Story 95. Supervisor was caught sexting women that reported into him. Apparently, some of the women started blackmailing him that they'd report it to HR or his wife if he didn't give them undocumented time off or the easy work. He ended up getting caught because one of the women thought he was being unfair with the distribution of his favors, so she complained to HR about it. Only he was fired. They allowed him to quietly resign so it wouldn't become public, as it was a government organization. Story 96. Reasons he should have gotten fired but didn't. History of excessively aggressive behavior. Threatened coworkers over work-related problems. Consistently not filling out paperwork vital for our internal departments. Instead, taking on extra work in an effort to cut costs. Ignoring critical work. Related inspections. Undercharging clients. Harassing clients. Completely ignoring unpreferable clients. Exchanging obscenities with an old man with dementia. Reason he got fired. Called a senior coworker a Karen, and that senior coworker told management, "Fire him or I walk." Story 97. We had a girl who was hired as customer service. She told them in her interview that she was trying to become a model. I guess by model she meant I'm going to dress inappropriately for a workplace setting, like showing lots of stomach and cleavage and such. They caught her sleeping a few times, and she was just generally not good at her job. She made it nearly 2 years because it was just after the world went back to work and they were desperate for employees. Story 98. Bottling facility. Guy would come to work every day, slumping over his machine from very heavy pill use. He was very knowledgeable and had the answers to most of the machine's problems. But then management changed. They caught him one day for a straight 3 minutes falling and picking himself back up. And this dude worked there for about 7 years. He was told he could go to a rehabilitation center free on the Kamaye or be fired, and he denied it and just walked out. Story 99. Got robbed. As in, call my boyfriend and pretend to rob me and take the cash. We have cameras. Fired, jail. Boyfriend had warrants. Good luck. Also, that safe isn't coming open because I have the code in my brain. Shoot me. Well, there goes that code. Story 100. She apparently said something that she absolutely, positively should not have said. To this day, nobody in the know has ever told me exactly what she said. But considering some of the things regularly said around the office, I can only imagine it was hard R level. Story 101. A grown man's elderly mother came in to harass the owner, basically saying that he gave her son that computer and how dare he now accuse him of stealing. No computer was given, no one realized or knew why the computer went missing. No one ever accused him, but it was realized the computer did go missing. He told his mom that it was given to him, then told her that he was accused of stealing it, fired and charged for theft. Story 102. Our company's founder owned the building and rented some space at street level to outside businesses. A C-suite executive decided it would be a good idea to have an affair with the owner of one of those businesses in his office after hours. They were caught on cameras that he had insisted on installing. Story 103. Company cruise. This guy slept with a random woman before the ship even took off. He didn't show up for the muster drill, and they had to go find them. The guy continues to be a party animal and had several embarrassing moments. The final straw was he gambled a bunch and couldn't pay his tab at the end. They held him on the boat, arrested him, and he missed his flight home, never to be seen again. Crazy dude. Story 104. It's pretty hard to get fired from my job, but doing something unsafe will get you fired the same day. Had a dude reach into a moving fan on a semi-truck and cut himself pretty bad. Went to the hospital and then got fired. Basically, just do your safety. Paperwork and don't get hurt, and they could care less. If you're productive on top of being safe, then management will leave you alone forever except to give you raises. Story 105. In a sales org, we had someone dialing a number that played "Never Gonna Give You Up." They repeated it dozens of times a day. Same number, same call duration, repeatedly. Then they'd point to their call volume as evidence as to them working hard and wonder why they weren't getting business. Story 106. He would go in the bathroom and pee on the walls and then proceed to come out and tell the female workers to go clean the restrooms. He was called cause BC, one of the other male workers went in to use the restroom and cause him yellow-handed. See what I did there. While walking out, he proceeded to yell "duck you" until he made it out the door. Turns out, he was on me at Story 107. There was a guy who was hired because his mom knew our VP. He was clearly a trust fund kid who had no qualifications or experience. 3 weeks in, he disappeared for a few hours on a Friday and came back absolutely blitzed. He had clearly gone and done a lot of substances. To be fair, the VP who hired him fired him and apologized to everyone for not vetting him better. Story 108. Trying to rub one out while watching adult film on his phone at work. By at work, I mean a shared workspace with little to no privacy between coworkers. Multiple witnesses who gave accounts to HR in the investigation. HR knew all he had to do to keep the job was admit to it and agreed to some sort of suspension, compliance training, and a few other things. He still tried to deny it. Story 109. We were working as servers in a restaurant. Once she came in drunk, she wasn't even able to walk straight anymore. Whenever she was sober, she just showed us videos of her cats and didn't react when the bell rang. Cue to take a dish from the kitchen to the guest's table. Didn't make it past her trial period. Story 110. He was always weird, but seemed harmless. Then, one day, he was passing a female coworker in the hall, and he grabbed her by the shoulders and forcibly tried to kiss her. Story 111. Adult film on his home computer. Sheriff and SWAT team arrested him at work. Told him the charges in front of everyone. His dad also worked for the company. It was awesome. Story 112. Worked at oil refinery. One of our jobs was to open the valve on the bottom of a 100,000-gallon crude oil tank and drain out the crude water that sinks to the bottom, leaving just the oil in the tank. My coworker opened the valve to drain it and then walked away and forgot about it. Hours later, there were thousands of gallons of crude oil on the ground. Story 113. Looking at adult film on his computer. The company at the time had closed-door offices for everyone. I don't know exactly what went down, whether the idiot left his office door open, somebody came in unannounced, or what. But he got caught. I worked in it at the time. I was asked by HR to get logs of his internet activity. Story 114. He grabbed a coworker and slammed him on top of a car on the showroom floor in front of customers. He accused him of stealing his customer, car sales, because someone came in ready to buy a car on his day off. And the other sales guy was the first one the customer talked to. Story 115. New district manager comes to watch him work because he sells more phones than anyone by far. Guy is talking quietly with a young lady about a purchase. She finally says it's not the phone for her. He gently puts his hand on top of hers and asks her to think it over again. DM fired him on the spot. You can't ever put hands on the customer, guys. Story 116. Brought a knife to work. Started uttering threats about a coworker. Now, most of us carry X-Acto knives, box cutters, pocket knives for freight day. That's whatever. But he brought in this huge ducking knife and started flashing it to staff in his jacket while uttering how he wanted harm to become a very petite female coworker. That was a big ol' nope. Police were called and he was soon fired. Story 117. Slept with the boss. Thing is, boss was closet gay and didn't want his wife finding out. Wife did find out, the guy was fired. Boss is now hooking up with another guy in ER. Story 118. Woman, and she was a supervisor. She was punched by an employee and started to fight back, but another supervisor stopped her. That's not what she was fired for, though. They looked at the day's footage and found out that she was the one who had been stealing. Story 119. The last parts manager here didn't know how to look up parts in electronic catalogs and couldn't or refused to learn. Anytime someone asked him for a part, he would play with his computer for about 30 minutes and then say it was on back order and not available. I don't know how he lasted over a year. Story 120. I was delivering pizzas in college. One dude got fired same day for several things, including holding a pizza under his arm, vertically, as he walked up to the house. Then blamed us for not telling him not to do that. His last delivery, he missed the exit before smartphones and drove from Los Angeles to San Diego looking for the exit. Story 121. He turned out to be an African warlord who was wanted for multiple war crimes in his home country. He thought being a school janitor in the Midwest would be a good disguise. IIRC, he's serving time in a U.S. prison and will then be sent back to his home country where he'll more than likely be promptly executed. Story 122. He worked on the packaging side of the plant where everyone wore this clip on the belt box cutters for easy access. He thought it would be funny if he came in wearing a full-size machete. Story 123. Stealing from the till, using refunds onto their own debit card. Stupid AFLMAO. Found out later that she had done it at 3 other stores and was being charged. Only got house arrest for it. Story 124. He embezzled over $2 million by creating fake business expenses. The company decided to not pursue charges to attempt to keep it on the down low. He then had the audacity to ask for a reference months later. Story 125. Started talking about bombs after 9/11 whilst packing orders to go on a plane. The owner didn't like this guy but couldn't fire him legally without paying compensation, so used the story against him. Dave, they heard what you said about bombs on planes. Best thing is to just leave and stay away, I'll handle this. Story 126. We had a dude get paid to go to an in-person certification class. He ducked off for a week instead under the assumption he could just pass the test. Thing is, he could have asked for the exact same cert under self-study instead, but didn't. He just wanted what he thought was a free vacation. Story 127. HR didn't do a background check, and turned out the guy was an offer who was an ex-girls basketball coach. I'm sure you can imagine what happened. And he lasted 1 day here. A few people recognized him and reported it, and he was escorted out before the day was over. Story 128. He went up to a female employee who happens to be my best friend. He looks her up and down and says, "You've gotten fatter," and just walks away, LMAO. She was flabbergasted. There was a lot more he did leading up to that, but anyways, he was fired the next day. Story 129. Worked with a guy in his 60s. Failed a substances test. When asked why, he said, "I spent the weekend with a couple of escort doing substances at my place." I admire more about him than his honesty. Story 130. Guy in it was downloading adult film to his work computer and then watching it from home via remote desktop. Don't ask why. He managed to leave headphones connected on a day off. We were all in the office and just heard adult film start coming from his machine. Ducking Golden. Story 131. Tech sales rep. He was flown out to our head office for training during his first week on the job. On one particularly dreary, overcast day, he looked out the window, turned to his black manager, and said, "Wow, it's as dark as you out today." Later, dude. Story 132. This was years ago at a place I was bartending at. He showed up to work on PCP, got into a fistfight with 2 customers. It took 6 guys to hold him until the cops showed up. Story 133. Our old CFO got caught embezzling over $1 million from our company. He made up fake purchase orders payable to his shell company. Ended doing cushy federal time measured in months, not years. He also put his assets in his field's name for $1 to avoid confiscation. Story 134. For slamming a bullet down on a woman's desk at work and stating, "This one's for you." And this was 20 years ago, before the world we live in today. Guy was a ducking idiot all the way around. Story 135. I work corrections. One of our officers was in the hospital watching a prison and for whatever reason, thought it would be funny to unholster his weapon and point it at the prisoner. Story 136. He said he needed to take a pee while we were doing work on top of a 20-story building. He whipped out a water bottle and started pissing. Would have probably been fine if we weren't surrounded by buildings higher than 20 stories. Story 137. I still to this day don't know why I was fired. Not the right fit or some such blanket excuse, but I do know the guy they replaced me with was fired because he was found to be an offer. Story 138. Chased young women around the parking lot. Tried to force entry into the building after being removed. Threatened a workplace shooting. Brought a gun to work. Yeah, he was the most fired I've ever seen. His job basically evaporated. Story 139. Chris. Chris jumped in front of a train and lost himself outside of work. Some weird employment law made it that we had to then fire him. Not the worst thing to happen to Chris. Story 140. For selling hard substances through the Taco Bell drive-thru. His clients would pretend to be customers in the drive-thru ordering something. He would put the baggies of substances in those $5 craving box boxes. Story 141. Our company office is near a casino, and the casino has a gas station. One of our electricians would park at a pump and go into the casino every morning for about 30 more minutes 1 hour. He got caught and fired today. Story 142. We are working with disabled people and ex-alcoholics and ex-substances abusers. Always coming late, lying about coworkers, stealing cigarettes from our disabled people, not calling in sick. When sick, he was chilling on a yacht drinking cocktails. Story 143, store manager was fired for getting a subordinate pregnant at the store. There was apparently significant video evidence. He's now wanted by the FBI. Story 144. Guy who used a cane decided to bring a cane sword in one day. Denied that it was a cane sword. It was clearly a cane sword. It was the first time my past employer won an unemployment suit. Story 145. He was making TikTok videos of all his OSHA violations. There were roughly 160 of them. HR stumbled across then, and the union really didn't want to defend them, but had to, I guess. Didn't work out for him. Story 146. A company-wide report was pulled on misuse of internet. From this, the top 100 were identified. The #1 guy in our branch was actually watching more hours of adult film than he was scheduled to work per day. Story 147. Train conductor. My colleague was found passed out drunk in an empty cab crew compartment in civilian clothes. When the guy working woke him up, he got aggressive, and they had to get security guards to pull him off. What's the fastest way you've seen someone fired from a job? Story 1. I worked at a country club that was fairly prestigious where I live. One of the members was Bill Cowher, former coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers and now a studio analyst for CBS. During the summers, Cowher lived in my town and played golf at the club fairly frequently. Well, some kids started on a bright Tuesday morning. We got into work at 6 o'clock, and Cowher rolled in at 8:30 to play a round of golf. He usually played by himself, really even-keeled guy. This guy sees him and asks, "Hey, is that Cowher?" We all tell him yes, and he raises his voice, just enough to where Cowher could hear him, and goes into a tirade about how much the Steelers suck and how the Ravens, their rivals, are so much better, even bringing up Roethlisberger's transgressions, shall we say. Anyway, the kid also lays into a bunch of personal insults on Cowher. We watched Cowher go into the pro shop of the club. 2 minutes later, one of the top guys of the club walks down and tells the new guy to get out. Total time working about 2 hours and 40 minutes. Story 2, about an hour into training. I work with infants at a daycare, and I had a new hire that I was training. One of my 4-month-olds had been crying all day, and I could tell my trainee was getting fed up with it, even though she'd only been in my room for like half an hour around the infant. I was busy changing diapers and making different bottles, and didn't notice that I could no longer hear that baby screaming. I finally realized it when I grabbed his bottle out of the bottle warmer and couldn't find him. I started freaking out and asked the trainee where he was. Turns out, she had just opened the back door, put the baby on the ground outside, and left him out there to get rid of the crying. She begged me not to tell, but you don't just put a baby outside. Right then, one of my directors came by to see how everything was going, and I told her what happened. The trainee was fired before she had even officially started working. Story 3. I worked as a delivery driver for Pizza Hut in college. Basically, anyone who applied and had a driver's license would get hired. So this kid, we'll call him Steve, came in on his first day of work, and this was a transcript of his entire period of employment at Pizza Hut. Steve, so where's the car I'm going to use? Manager. You use your own car. Steve, but I don't have a car. Manager. Well, then you can't be a delivery driver. Story 4. Less than 3 minutes. I worked for a tree service for a few years, so I saw a lot of people come and go that couldn't handle it. New guys were always showing up, but this 18-year-old never had a job before. Been told he is special all his life, and he felt respect was given, not earned. This kid never made it to the trucks. We parked our work trucks close to the areas we worked in various parking lots, so our personal cars were usually parked close to ensure a spot for the work truck that afternoon. New kid parks right in the middle, trying to show he is important. Before he got out, the boss set his coffee cup on the kid's back bumper and starts the morning safety meeting. Kid walks around his truck and screams, "Who the heck put their damn cup on my truck?" and knocks it to the ground. The end. Story 5. Had a girl come in for training her first day at the bakery I worked at. Halfway through the shift, she takes my coworker's cell phone, flip phone, out of her bag, looks her in the eye and says, "This is nice," and then snapped it clean in half. My boss was in such shock that he didn't even yell, just told her to get out and not come back. Chick wanted to know if she was getting paid too. Story 6. Half an hour. Working in Arby's, new girl shows up. They run her through how to work the cash register on a few dummy orders. She takes a real order or two and then it gets slow. She asks to duck out for a minute, to smoke, and never came back. Register ended up being a hunch short that day. Story 7. I worked at a pretty big company. I was at work early one morning around 7:30 trying to get a head start, and I see the new guy, an entry-level, super nice dude. He had just started a week or two prior, and he was also in the office early, trying to make a good impression. Anyway, he thought it would be a good idea to start up a fantasy football league in the office. So he sends out an email about fantasy football to everyone, to EVERYONE. The company is a huge multinational corporation. He sent the email to every single employee, manager, director, VP, COO, etc. But more than that, he sent it to every single distribution list. So people were getting double, triple, quadruple emails. He effectively shut down the entire email system with a failed attempt to increase office morale. Big boss comes in at 8, closes the door to his office, and sits at the desk. A minute later, I hear, "What the F?" He calls in the noob to his office. By 8:30, the new guy is walking out the door escorted by security. True story. New guy accidentally sends an email to the whole company, clogging up the system, is fired in 1 hour. The company I worked for is a pretty big global financial firm. No transactions were done via email, of course, but a lot of information sharing, reporting, publishing was on a pretty set schedule, depending on the global markets. Pretty time sensitive. In addition, the Fantasy Football League required a monetary buy-in. So in addition to clogging up the email system, the new guy was sort of soliciting gambling, which is a no-no, and he used company resources to do it, which is a double no-no, no. Last bit of info, this was back in like 2006, so I don't know if that makes a difference on the type of networks, blah blah. I don't know a thing about it stuff. Story 8, 6 minutes. Had a friend who worked as a telemarketer and totally blacked out and started yelling at people over the phone. He still lists this job on his resume like a boss. Story 9, about 4 hours. In high school, I worked at an ice cream shop. My boss hired a new girl and said she was going to be working her first shift with me. She came in wearing a black jacket and black pants, which wasn't really the dress code, but whatever. For 4 hours, she would not come out of the corner. I tried to coax her many times, but wouldn't budge. I think they had some other issues, but she started crying, so I gave up and left her alone. My boss awkwardly told her it wasn't going to work out after that. Story 10. I've seen people fired faster than this, but the guy who should have been fired fastest was actually fired after 2 weeks. I worked at Starbucks. We hired some weird, sketchy kid. 18, but he acted a little like a sociopath and creeped people out. He never laughed, never smiled, never showed any emotion. Wasn't autistic, but I honestly wonder if he was a sociopath of some sort. Someone saw him putting out cigarettes on his arm during one of his breaks, and while I was incredulous about it, I saw the burns on his arm later that week, so they must have come from somewhere. Anyway, first day, he gets trained on some stuff and then gets trained on register. Most of the time, someone is right next to him, but not the entire time. His till comes up $20 short at the end of his shift. They assume he lost it or ducked up somehow because he's new. Then, on his next shift, the same thing. Again, every shift over 2 weeks until they finally said he was no longer allowed to work on the register. His till came out $40 short. This guy was stealing from the register on his first day and got to keep working there for 2 weeks, which amazed me. Story 11. I worked for a tech company for a while where the president of the company had previously been the manager of the city's largest strip club. For girls who didn't want to dance anymore, he offered them jobs at our company as sales assistants, receptionists, and occasional full sales jobs. These girls had about a 50% success rate. Some stayed around for a while. Others were fired within a week. And then there was Miranda, who didn't make it a half hour on her first day. She was clearly incompetent from the get-go. Arrived late, wouldn't get off of her phone to answer the office line, and in 30 minutes stated, "I'm just not feeling this," 10 times before she asked if she could go home and start the next day. She was allowed to go home, but not asked to return. Story 12. IDK if this girl was actually fired, or if the manager just forgets about her. But she applied for a job at a movie theater and got it. She was then never put on the schedule or called to work. She didn't work a single hour. She even tried calling and then got no response. Story 13. One of my friends worked in a newsagent around the corner from me. He was 16 at the time. In the interview, he was asked about weekend hours. As being a student, this was the ideal time for him. And he told them he couldn't work either day because he'd be watching football. They gave him one shift, and not once did he call the manager the right name. They had to take him off stacking shelves because he was making more of a mess than doing his job. And when they asked him to go around the local area with flyers, he gave some 12-year-old kid $5 to do half of them, and then threw the other half in the bin right in front of his boss. The boss fired him when he turned around and saw him there. The kid earned more money in that shop than he did. Story 14. My roommate got a job at a burrito place, left for his first day, and I wished him good luck. I came home later and asked him how it went. He said he got fired. I laughed at him thinking it was a joke. Nope. Apparently, he got which day was his first day wrong. He was a whole 2 days late. Story 15. I got a job at a cafe where my buddy's girlfriend had been hired the day before as a manager. I walk in on my first day, and she's getting canned 5 minutes into her shift. The cafe is in a sleepy area of New England where there's a high concentrate of celebrities with homes and vacation homes. One of the first rules was to treat them like you didn't know who they were. They preferred some semblance of anonymity, and we were asked by the owner to respect that. My buddy's girlfriend couldn't keep it together when a certain handsome multiple Oscar winner came in that morning and started hyperventilating and seriously putting the spook into this guy. I came in a few minutes later, and she's hanging up her apron and wishing me good luck. Story 16. My old roommate got hired at a country club as a chief. He cooked several meals for them and went through 3 different interviews. They were impressed and told him to be there at 7 a.m. to prep the next morning. He showed up and they said, "Why are you here? Leave before we call the police. The kitchen is for employees only." He left in shock as the same people that interviewed him told him he was trespassing. Story 17. Back when I was working for McDonald's, our store was hosting a job fair hire on the spot sort of event, and they hired a guy on the spot. Then 3 minutes later fired him during the store tour when he dropped a crack pipe out of his pocket and onto the manager's shoe. That was also the last hire on spot done at our store. Thankfully, because that always seemed like a really dumb idea. Story 18. I used to tour with bands as a sound guy, mostly mixing opening acts for B-level country artists. It sucked. Then, the company I worked with got a 4-night run with Engelbert Humperdinck. Yeah, that guy. I had heard stories about him, legends even, that he never spoke to crew, only to his front-of-house guy via a dedicated phone line from the stage. The house guy would then relay the message to the appropriate party. The most common message was, "You're done." Knowing this, we brought 3 audio guys out on this 4-gig run. My buddy Tom was A1, in charge of most everything, and I was to do monitors. Chris was there as a system tech. Day 1, band sound check. Mr. Humperdinck is nowhere to be seen, but his house guy John is standing in because he knows what Engelbert wants to hear. Things are going well. I have good sounds from the band and solid mixes all around. I'm feeling fairly confident. Pretty basic show with 8 mixes of monitors for the band, 3 more for me, Humperdinck. Wedges, side fills, 1 in-ear monitor. Showtime. Finally see the talent. True to the rumor, he speaks to no one and walks right past me onto stage. I don't mind. I don't take it personally. He's in show mode, and I am too hyper-focused. The band started, and I see Mr. Humperdinck immediately reach for his belt pack and adjust the volume in his ears. He looks at me, and then moves to his music stand, picks up the phone, mumbles something, puts it down, and then starts the first verse. I was fired by the end of the first chorus. Oh well. Like I said, this was day 1. We had prepared for this. Tomorrow's another day, right? John spends most of the night going between front of house and the side of the stage, making adjustments for Mr. Humperdinck. At no point does he let Nora ask for help, and he's keeping it under control, like he's probably done before. After the show, I tried to find out just what it was that got me canned so quickly, especially since I never touched that pack or volume control after sound check. Never got a straight answer other than, "Don't take it personally." But the guys in the band were cool, so I wasn't too pissed. Nights 2 and 3 are non-eventful. Tom is on stage for night 2 and gets fired about halfway through the night. Chris lasts almost the whole 3rd show, but bites it hard by missing a cue, resulting in a blast of feedback from a horn player getting close to a side fill that hadn't been turned down. Night 4, I'm back in the rotation. Sound check is a mess. Venue issues, lighting issues, everything that could go wrong did. But we've been using the same gear the whole week, so everything is pretty much dialed in. Show starts. He enters the stage from the other side and jumps into the first song. He looks over at me, squinting, but does not go to the phone. A few lines in, he looks again, even shielding his eyes so he can see better. Then he hits the phone. Next thing I know, the lighting guys got moving lights coming at me, and my dark monitor world is now very, very bright. After my eyes adjust, I see Mr. Humperdinck on the phone again. I was refired moments later. John told me after the show that Mr. Humperdinck couldn't see me, and once he could, he recognized me from 3 nights before. Also, this was probably 12 to 15 years ago. No idea how many other monitor engineers have been fired since. And lastly, I just admit, dude did put on a good show. I can't even say he was the biggest pain or most peculiar artist or even really idiot, because he wasn't. At least not to my face. Truth is, it ate at me for a while because I take my work very seriously and try to do it well. But since I've become okay with the idea that maybe that's just his thing, it's just that simple. Story 19. I worked for a major 3-lettered computer company. A new service tech was hired. Once he logged in, he pulled out a portable hard drive from his backpack, connected it to his machine, and started to copy everything he had access to. Within 3 hours, security was escorting him out the door. Story 20. I used to work at a Panera Bread, maybe worked there about 6 months, and I saw dozens of people come and go. My manager was a duckface and only hired delinquents he thought he could change. He always talked about how he was a role model and a pillar of the community, and how he took dozens of at-risk youths off the streets and gave them a good job. So he would hire the crapheads, but me and my coworkers had to deal with it. One day, he hired this guy named Ronnie. I remember when he came in to interview. He was 5'5", 13 pounds, smelled like crap, and wore a 10X hoodie covered in crowns. Dude, duckin' sucked. He also had a dirt lip mustache and crazy acne. I didn't catch the interview, but he gave my boss daps instead of a handshake. He came in to train 2 hours late smelling like substances and booze. He introduced himself to me and gave me daps and practically collapsed on me. I showed him the ropes and took a few customers in front of him. This woman, a regular named Sandy, was placing her order and gave him kind of a dirty look. It turns out he was scoping her out and licking his lips. He saw the dirty look and said, "You got a ducking problem." I had to pull him aside and explain etiquette and crap with him, but he said she was giving him a look, and he shouldn't have to take that. I said he needed to apologize, and he said fine. I took him over to apologize, and he threw a bottle of water at her, hitting her right in the forehead. I had to hold him back because he was trying to climb over the counter at her. I called the boss and told him, and he said not to worry. It was his first day. He had to learn. About a half hour goes by without incident, and the boss shows up. Ronnie went right to the boss and said, "This idiot was giving me a nasty face, boss. I didn't mean nothing by it. I just got overcome with emotions," or some bullcrap sob story like that. Boss said not to worry about it. Someone's order was up, and Ronnie brought the tray over to the counter. As he passed it to the woman, he grabbed a crouton off her salad and said, "Let me get that," and started gnawing and giggling. He said, Did you see what I just did?" And I gave the boss a look, and he said, it's fine, don't worry." Finally, after a grand hour and a half of Ronnie being there, he made himself a giant sandwich with every topping and said he was going on break. The boss told him not yet, and Ronnie said it'll just be a minute. He had to make a call. He came back 2 hours later and made another sandwich. The boss took him into the office, and he was let go. Also, from the 10 seconds I held Ronnie back that day, I smelled like him until I got home. Never saw him again. Story 21. I was a game tester for a generic company that handled whatever games needed to be tested by any company that gave us their beta. The new guy was this 40-year-old creeper. We tried to train him how to play the game so he could test it. It was a virtual card game, so understanding how the game was played took some time and understanding. For a whole week, he came in and just stared at his screen. Didn't even pick up the controller, write down notes, or do anything. Apparently, he had been coming into work stoned out of his mind every day and was too high to do anything. He mysteriously didn't come in on Monday, but we only noticed because the place no longer smelled like smoke, failure, and burning substance. Story 22. I would have handled the situation much differently today. I got hired to work at Books A Million and was pretty excited since I enjoy books and reading. Anyway, as I was talking to the manager about orientation, I heard one of the other employees ask who the hot guy the manager was talking to. Someone mentioned that it was the new guy. I didn't mind that a gay guy thought I was good looking. I actually take it as a compliment. Fast forward an hour. I'm watching some video presentation, and the guy who made the comment comes in and asks how I'm doing. I say fine, and he states that I'm cute. I tell him something like, I'm happy he thinks so, but I'm straight and no thanks. He comes up to me, touches my shoulder, and says he can make me forget about women or something cheesy like that. I tell him again, more forcefully this time, that I'm flattered, but I am not interested, and for him to not harass me again or he won't like the result. About an hour later, I'm walking to the coffee shop in the store, and I stop to look at a book. Gay dude walks by and pinches me. I see dead red immediately, and he's just standing there with this suave look on his face. I decked him, walked up to the manager, yelled that I would be suing for harassment. I had told the manager earlier about the interaction in the room, and he heard the first remark, and I left. I never stepped foot in that BAM again, and I never sued. Story 23. Had a guy get hired by my first job, which was a cable TV company. One of the job qualifications was that you had to climb poles either by using ladders or gaffing, which is spikes you put on your feet that stick into the pole. If you didn't have the certification, the company would train you. We had poles set up in the back of the yard, and the supervisors would train/certify new people who already knew how. Being a regular worker, I would get called to help every once in a while, since they usually trained about 10 people at a time, and it was one guy doing it. They hired this guy and took him through the entire hiring process, orientation, etc., where they explained the job and the requirements. He was issued his equipment, and we walked out to the poles. Was a group of 8 people along with the supervisor and me. Got out to the poles, and the supervisor started explaining to the group what we would be doing and asking people if they had experience or not. The ones who did would get a certification test right there, and if they passed, they would be done and certified for the year. While he was doing this, the guy taps me on the shoulder. "You mean we have to climb with these?" He's holding the gaffs in his hands. "Up there?" "Yes, sometimes higher, but to where the feeder line is on these poles, yes." I tell him, "I can't do that," he says. He hands his climbing belt and gaffs to me and walks back towards the office, where he walked into HR and quit on the spot. Total time for that shift, about 9 minutes. I'm guessing they had to pay him for the 4 hours he spent in orientation the day before. Mind you, they probably asked him or mentioned about 10 times that climbing poles was part of the job. I guess he was afraid of heights. Story 24. On a construction site, high-rise, you have to be tied off 100%. If you walk within 10 feet of the leading edge of the building, zero tolerance. This kid's first day ducks under the rope and walks about a foot away from a 60-foot drop. I yelled at him and pointed at the rope. He says, "Oh," and ducks back under. He was off site 45 min later. Total time about 3 hours. Story 25. Waitress's first job was to take the brand new glasses out of the boxes, put them through the washer, and put them away. She got them all in racks about 10 high on a set of wheels, tried to push them, and they all fell over. The manager said he felt bad, but had to fire her. Story 26. Saw a woman come in for a receptionist job on her first day about 45 minutes late. We said apparently we'd work with her on her schedule because she had a kid, but 45 minutes late on your first day with no call? She was escorted out almost immediately. Story 27. I used to manage a restaurant. The other manager hired a girl from Hooters because he thought she was cute and all. Well, I am counting the money from the day before and getting the deposit slip all filled out in my office. An employee comes in my office and says she is here for training. I grab the paperwork she needs to fill out and grab my bank bag. I walked up and gave her paperwork. I realized I forgot a document, so I went back to the office, but I slipped up and left the bank bag on the counter by the register. It was only her, and I got up there, as this is about 9. Well, I leave and go to the bank to deposit the deposit, and guess what? I am $40 short. So I'm like, damn, I dropped 40 somewhere, and head back to work. Can't find it. Ask her if she saw it, and she says no. So I watched the security cameras, and sure enough, the Karen opened the bag and stole it. She had literally been there for under 5 minutes and stole from us. I called the cops. They came and arrested her. Found 3 pill bottles in her purse, and she had 2 warrants out for her arrest. She had been to jail before. She didn't even tear up and called me a banana for calling the cops. Story 28. I worked as a delivery driver cashier for a restaurant, and the owners would get their cooks, who were all undocumented, from some connection they had. One morning, I was asked to pick up the new cook from the bus station. I saw him sitting on a bench holding a can and a brown paper bag and knew exactly what it was. He gets in the car and asks me if it was okay for him to finish it. I told him I'd wait for him, but I was not going to drive him around like that. He pounds back whatever he was drinking and then stuck like 5 pieces of gum in his mouth. He explained he bought it at the last stop to help pass the time. On the short drive back, he just kept asking me about the restaurant and the other guys who worked there. When we pulled up, I told him he should try to avoid talking real close to the owner because I was still able to smell the alcohol on him. He said, "Don't worry, I have lots of gum." As soon as we walked through the door, we bumped into the owner who stopped in her tracks and started sniffing the air. She walks up to him, takes one good whiff and flips out and starts screaming, out, take him back." I felt bad for the guy, so I gave him the ride back to the bus station. I couldn't believe how quickly he got fired, but he had no one to blame but himself. Story 29. I hired a girl to work customer service at the front desk of our company. Her job consisted of greeting customers and working the cash register intermittently. She showed up for her first day of work hungover or on some kind of downers, and about 30 minutes into training, she had to leave because she wasn't feeling well. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Later that day, after I finished my shift, I went out with my wife to go see a movie. I saw her there, obviously feeling fine. Apparently, she just didn't feel like working. She was too embarrassed to come back to work the next day, so technically I didn't have to fire her. She worked for a total of 30 minutes. I think her paycheck came out to like $380. Story 30. I was working at a Panera Bread when this guy came in for his first day of work. We showed him the ropes in the dining room, which is basically just cleaning the tables and carpets and making coffee and whatnot. At the end of the night, we all have different closing duties we have to do before we clock out and leave. He vacuumed half the carpet and then just left without saying anything. Never saw him again. Story 31. We had a new salesman for 2 hours. He came in and said hell to everyone, sat down and started getting ready for his new job. An hour passes or something and he gets called into my boss's office. Around 25 minutes passes and a few police officers show up and escort him out. It turns out he stole lots of money from the previous place he worked the day before he was hired at our place. We didn't even get to say goodbye. Story 32. I fired a guy about 2 hours into his first day. I worked for a company that was on contract to do the computer setup portion of residential broadband installations for a large cable company. We got to our first stop of the day, met the customer, and headed inside the house. The cable guy was still working on the install, so I stepped outside to see how things were coming along and left the new guy inside. When I came back, the new guy was on the customer's computer and was looking through the customer's hard drive. I asked him WTF he was doing, and he says, "This dude has the most adult film I've ever seen." That was right about the same time that the customer, a married man with kids, came walking into the room. Needless to say, he wasn't happy that someone was going through his private stuff, and he was very embarrassed at what had been found to boot. I sent the new guy outside to wait in the car while I smoothed things over and finished the install. I knew crap was going to hit the fan in a hurry, so rather than go to my next stop, I drove back to the office. We went inside and I had him wait in the lobby while I went and told my boss what happened. He said, "Do what you think is best." I walked back out into the lobby and told him to GTFO. Side story. He tried to sue the company for discrimination a couple of weeks later. Story 33. I went to bat for a friend's friend who needed a job, begged my boss to hire him. She let me do the interview. I threw him the softest softball questions ever. She hired him on my recommendation, walked him through his W-4 and all that crap, filed it with corporation. I asked when he could start. He says Monday. Monday comes, and no John. He just never showed up to his first day. I ate a lot of crap from my boss over that one. Story 34. I worked at Home Depot in college. For the 2 weeks I was working the lot, I saw probably 10 guys get canned on the first day, and most within a couple of hours of starting. The recurring theme was simple. You were told that you are to retrieve the carts and help customers load their merchandise into their cars. Never ever tell the customers they need to bring carts back or get someone else to help them load. I saw idiot after idiot tell customers, "You bought it. It's not my problem. You can't lift it." And, "Hey, bring that cart back over when you are done." Pure ducking laziness. I learned it right then and there. The meaning of, you can't find good help. A serious amount of duck-ups came through that place. I was promoted in week 2 to lumber. My secret? Roll the orange carts back to the front of the store without being told to do so every 20 minutes. Not bumming cigs off of customers also helped. One dude I worked with did this all day. Would have a pack and a half saved up for when he got off. Story 35, owned a small burgers and fries shack. I had a few hire and never show up before. Since they were high school kids, I was a git and sent an official job abandonment termination letter to their houses. Always hoped the parents got them first. As with many other stories here, the fastest that actually showed up was 30 minutes for theft. Just finished training up a girl. She just took an order under my supervision. Everything went fine. Took a few more. I felt she was getting the hang of it. She took one on her own, with me just kind of hanging back. Looked good. Wandered to my tiny little office to make a call to the company I bought burger from. Heard another sale go through. Wandered back up around the corner. Watched her pocket the $20 the customer handed her and make change out of my register. What? Gonna have to call you back. Asked her if she just pocketed money from me. No, of course not. Ran till report, pulled the till, had her follow me back to my office, counted down the till, of course, $20 short, counted it again, $20 short, asked if she was sure she didn't just take $20 from me and put it in her pocket. Much less sure of herself, but no, of course not. I asked how there's a $20 in her left front pocket then. The $20 I personally saw her stick into her pocket. Oh, sweet delicious tears of being caught. 1, you're fired. Next, you have 2 options. Hand me the $20 right now, and I call mommy or daddy to pick you up and explain why you were fired. Option 2 is I just call the cops and press charges instantly. Nope, you can't just walk home. I'm offering the call the parents option out of the goodness of my heart. If I was an a-hole, as you keep telling me I am, I would have just called the cops. Dad was one of my regulars and was pissed. Good, that's sorted. Told her I'd mail her paycheck, all $2.50 or so of it, for the 32 minutes she was officially on the clock. Story 36, too buried deep, but I'll go ahead and share my story of Tommy. I don't even have to do a story. I'll just list all the things he did on the first day as being a waiter. 10 a.m., pre-lunch rush. First day he walks in, and one of the girls says, "Hi, what's your name?" He snaps at her. "You don't deserve to know." I try to teach him the menu, and he brushes it off and says, "I don't need to learn, I speak English." He boasts to everyone about how valuable and knowledgeable he is because he's worked at 10 different restaurants before. He keeps a backwards hat on his head at all times. Manager tells him to take it off, but he says he has to keep it on for disability reasons. He looks more like a thug than a waiter. 11 a.m., 12 p.m., I tried to show Tommy how to input and use the computer. He immediately brushes me off and says, "I've used one before." I say to him, "Hey, Tommy, can you refill the glasses at the tables in the corner?" He says, "Shut up," and walks in the other direction. A customer walks in, says, "Hey, can I order the teriyaki chicken?" Tommy takes the order, puts in the wrong number because he didn't want to learn the menu. Wrong dish comes out and tries to serve it to the customer. Customer says, "This isn't what I ordered. I always order teriyaki chicken." Tommy shoves the plate further at him, argues with the customer, and tells him to just eat it. Customer got angry and just left. Customer was a regular. We lost a regular to brash stupidity. Manager sees the whole thing happen, tries to scold Tommy. Tommy shoots back, "I wasn't shown how to properly use the machine, so what could I do?" Manager's too busy to be bothered with this crap right now. 1 p.m. He's cleaning a table and I tell him not to stack the cups or they'll get stuck. He ignores me and keeps stacking the cups. I repeat myself, "Tommy, don't stack the cups. He then shouts at me, I heard you the first time. I ask him to hand me a check. He holds onto it for 15 whole seconds while I wait. I repeat, can you give me the check? He finally gives it to me. I say, thank you very much. He mockingly repeats, thank you very much. Once the lunch rush was over, the manager tells him that he can't use him anymore. Total work time, 3 hours, which was 2 hours, 55 minutes too slow. Story 37, not really feared, but dismissed. I had a big retrofit project. I needed 2 temps to assist me for about 3 weeks. Some of the work was slightly technical, so we were offering about $13,000. The temp firm sent 2 guys, muscly guy and skinny guy. I took them onto the floor and explained what was going on. I had barely finished 1 sentence when skinny guy pipes up. We get lunch, right? Yeah, lunch is noon to 1. So anyway, when a new unit is first disassembled, we need to ensure the bottom cover with its serial number matches the and breaks. We are supposed to get 2 breaks, a morning break and an afternoon break. Yeah, no problem. So anyway, to make sure the bottom cover matches its chassis, we'll be setting them over. The breaks have to be 15 minutes. The law says the breaks have to be the 15 minutes. Yeah, sure, 15 minutes. But when we're not at lunch or on a break, we'll be doing retrofits. So the chassis will have 3 circuit boards removed. The screws must be kept in these plastic cups and must be... I just want to be clear. We get full 1-hour lunch and 2 15-minute breaks. The law says the breaks have to occur at certain times. Like, we can't work 3 hours before one break, then 4 hours before the next break. They need to be... Tell you what, guy. I think we can probably get through this with only one of you. Give me your blue card and I'll fill out the hours you accrued today. Turn into your agency for payment. Thanks for coming, but I don't think we'll need you. He stammered, then handed me his card. I gave him 2 hours and sent him off. He had been on the job for about 8 minutes. Muscly guy ended up being awesome. He listened to my instructions, worked quickly, and made very few mistakes. It was mind-numbing work for the both of us, but he was cheerful and positive. If I had full-time work for that kid, I would have hired him in an instant. The other guy? Douche. Story 38. I work in it. Days in, we give a laptop to a new agent to check his connections at home. He comes back to work and starts to have some issues, and we notice he has a flash drive attached to the back of his laptop. When we boot up the computer and go onto the flash drive and see all our licenses for company software from a shared folder on this flash drive, he was escorted off the premises immediately without the flash drive. Lucky for him, our company decided not to sue him. Story 39. A guy was hired as tech manager at a TV studio. He walked into the studio on his first day in flip-flops and a scarf. His boss happened to be there and said, Doug, come here, please. Give me your ID. Now leave. Edit, not only was it overly casual, but scarf and flip-flops are a pretty odd combo. Ever seen anyone in a big scarf and flip-flops? Also, tech manager in that position means he is a supervisor. Spends his day walking around to make sure things go smoothly and people are doing their jobs, and being the face of the studio to the production company, responding face-to-face to client, ESPN, complaints or directives, and resolving any issues. Story 40. I used to deliver pizza in my early years. One evening, I'm in the office counting my cash for checkout, when in walks a new hire my boss mentioned would be coming by to drop off some paperwork. I look up and recognize his face instantly. My filter came off and I said, "What the duck are you doing here?" Not so nicely. His first response was an, "Oh, damn," because I had worked with him at 2 previous jobs and knew exactly what kind of guy he was. He harassed people, attacked a few customers, and got fired for him both of those jobs. He was fired before his first day when I brought his resume to the manager and went through every lie on it supported by phone calls to previous bosses. He also once tried to catch me so he could hurt me. I'm sure it would have been bad if he could have caught me running through a McDonald's parking lot until my boss came out and stopped him, as he was a big 250 plus guy.